Hey everybody, welcome back to Comic Frontline. This is our e-panel where it's just like a Comic-Con panel except for we have no limitations on who can sit in the seats. We have our chat open, so if you want to ask our guest, Bob Salley, a question, please do that and we'll be sure to get as many of those as possible. But we also have our own questions for him. And before we get into those questions, let's introduce Bob Salley, creative Ogre. So, Bob, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and about your book?
Yeah, so a little bit about myself. I started writing. God, I don't even know when I started writing. Back when I was a little kid, I wanted to draw. Like I think that's what most comic book writers wanted to do. They wanted to draw first, and then when they realized that they can't draw, then it's like, all right, the next best thing. Let's try writing. So I kind of got into that to the writing at an early age, and I was doing novellas and poems, and I never really. I mean, I loved comics growing up, but I never got back into that until way late in life. And it wasn't. It was until I hit writer's block, and I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and one of my professors told me that whenever you hit writer's block, just write anything, and laundry list of anything. So I was at a bar one night and Star Wars was on, and it was the end comes on and the Death Star blows up. So I just started thinking like, what if like there was like a company that was in space, that and it hired different crews to go out and clean up the valuable garbage that's in space. And so the thing that got me out of writer's block was writing down, what the different crews would be, and what the roles would be. You'd have a captain, you'd have a pilot, obviously, and then you'd have a maintenance man, a tech guy, a demo guy. So I just started writing like that was it. Like I just started making lists, and then with those lists, I started writing down different names of characters, and then it just built into describing who the characters were. And little by little, I just started building these characters that became the crew for my Salvagers comic book series. And and again at the time, I didn't realize I was going to write it in a comic book form. So there was like 9 characters in this and all. And then when I thought to do it as a comic book, I realized like how hard it was going to be to develop 9 characters. So I dumbed it down to like 4 characters and gave the ship AI. And then little by little, I just started figuring out how to write a comic books. I went to Dark Horse Comics and I saw that their submission, they had like an outline of how to, script. So that's kind of how I kind of stumbled into writing comics. And I think the concept worked well. It was, Star Wars meets Sanford and Son. And then that was, yeah. And then that was it. Like I really focused heavily on writing Salvagers. And little by little, I was like, I got some other ideas. So, and then I started getting to know some artists, and that started snowballing. And then I was at a comic book convention, and I met Sean Daly, and I loved his work, and we decided we wanted to work together on something. But I absolutely had nothing for him to work on, and my editor and my editor in chief, Travis McIntyre at Source Point Press, took an idea that I had, and we kind of fit it to fit Sean Daly's art style, which is Ogre. So I know it's a long-winded explanation of how I got into this and to bring us all the way to where we are now at Ogre, but in a nutshell, so to speak, that's it.
Well, a writer's journey is always long, so.
That is true.
Speaking of Ogre, why don't you tell us a little bit about the book itself?
So Ogre, Ogre is a story about a reclusive ogre who is, we find him in the pits of a dungeon, and he is chained to a corpse. And then we find out that he is actually being haunted by the ghost of that corpse. Now, he's not being haunted in like a conjuring way. He's being haunted in more of like a, frightener's way, where he's, this ghost is basically trying to egg him on to go on an adventure that this reclusive ogre doesn't want to go on. And then, the beautiful art of Sean Daly depicts this, the events where we follow the ogre, going through this this fantasy land of different two different sides fighting against each other, and he's trying to help these humans, get through the land as these troll bounty hunters are coming after them.
Cool. Kat, you have a question?
Jinx, you owe me a soda, Jay, because we both said cool at the same time. Yes. So first off, what made you decide to pitch to SourcePoint, or have you worked with them before? Can you walk us through the process of distributing comics with Diamond?
So when I was self-published for a long time, and I was at Chicago Comic-Con, and I had been talking to Gary Reed, who was the editor-in-chief at Caliber Comics, and I was looking to pitch Salvagers to a small press publisher, and talking to Gary Reed, Caliber was way more into horror. And when I showed him Salvagers, and he had said SourcePoint Press would, I should take this to SourcePoint Press and talk to Travis McIntyre. And immediately I thought he was just blowing me off. As creators are, we're always like, it's horrible. So I was at C2E2, and that's when I went out and I sought the SourcePoint Press booth, and I met people like Greg Wright, who does Monstrous, among other titles, and Casey Pierce, who does Nora, and also other titles. And I met Travis McIntyre, who I had no idea he and I were going to end up being like the bestest friends in the world. And Travis, if you're watching, I know you're laughing right now. But I saw like what they were doing, and it was kind of awesome. You didn't really see that anywhere else. Is they had this booth, and they had their creators at the booth pushing their titles, and it really impressed me. So talking to Josh Warner and Travis and other people that were with SourcePoint Press, I really got a really good feeling for the vibe of not just the editor-in-chief and the art director, but also the creators. And it seemed like they didn't just look at it as a publisher; they looked at it as a home, and they didn't look at the people that they were working with as co-creators or co-workers. They looked at them as they were family. And now being with them for, I think it's been like 3 years now. I look at the creators that I work with and all these cons that I go to with them. And I look at them as family. I mean, we are at times, we are like 5 people deep in one hotel room. We did Wizard World Columbus, Morristown, New Jersey. And there was 5 of us, and the person that booked the room said that, they booked us 2 queens and we had 1 king. So you can imagine 5 guys in this hotel room with 1 king bed. So it's like little things like that, like on the road, being on the road, it's almost like your battle scars. Like you've gone to war with these people. So you really do have that strong sense of camaraderie with them, and you'll do anything for them. So you do get a really good sense of family with them. And then, so of course, it's I was impressed with how they are handling Salvagers, and I do a Starlight Tavern, which is a free web comic that's on their, which is on SourcePointPress.com's website. So I really like the way they were doing everything. So naturally, when I got this book Ogre, I wanted to keep it with them. And also the reason that I am traveling all over with SourcePoint Press. So if I have one book with them and I have another book with another publisher, it's going to be hard to go to cons and sell both books when, so it just seemed ideal to have everything in one place if these cons are going on. And SourcePoint Press does a really good job. They do all the printing of the books. They go to over 70 shows a year. So I know that this book is going to get good distribution, and they're building up a really reputable name for themselves. So it really wasn't a question. I never even thought to submit to Image or any of the other bigger publishers.
And how about distributing through Diamond? Well, I don't know if you know their choice of why they did that, or instead of doing crowdfunding.
Well, it was a decision that Travis and I both made. I personally, my whole career, I've done crowdfunding for all my new titles, and I've actually built a pretty good following on Kickstarter So when we got this book Ogre, we both agreed like we really wanted to. We thought we knew it was a really good book, and the artwork, speaks for itself. So Sean Daly's art, I mean, just looking at it, I think that'll draw a lot of people into it. And I'm a huge supporter of SourcePoint Press. I like to think of myself as not just a creator there. I'm also kind of in working in that front office with them, trying to do more. So looking at this book Ogre, we thought it was a good opportunity to really make an imprint in Diamond. And instead of going to Kickstarter and getting a big distribution on it, and then going to Diamond where people are going to be like, oh, well, I already got it through Kickstarter. We really wanted to have this be the first book that we were saying, like, this is the first book that the only place you can get it is through Diamond, or the first series, because, and so we were really happy about it, and we're going to get the numbers next week, and I'm sick to my stomach because it's one of those things where you're just you're waiting. In Kickstarter, when you do a crowdfunding, you can sit there and look on the platform and you can see the numbers keep going up and up, but
which is also sickening to look at too, but different type of sickening.
No, it's true, because it's never enough. That's the thing with crowdfunding. I mean, you could have 50 backers in a day and you're like, I needed 60, but it's one of those things where you're pushing it and you're pushing it and you're pushing it, and you don't see it building. You don't see what's going on. You have people saying like, oh, that looks great. Yeah, I'm going to go to my shop, but you don't know if they really are. So, we'll find out. We'll find out when the numbers come in, and it's hopefully it does well, and hopefully it makes a big imprint for me, and hopefully it makes a big imprint for SourcePoint Press.
And I think also I think what's tough about Diamond is how consumers don't understand the importance of pre-ordering. I see, creators keep pushing and pushing because it is important. That's where the numbers come from, is the, stores actually buying that amount, and they only will buy that amount if you pre-order. So I think, and even crowdfunding has, consumers a little confused, say, oh yeah, I'll get it after it, after the Kickstarter. It's like, no, get it. No,
get it. Yeah, get it. Because I've been doing all this pushing and everything on it, and a friend of mine who's not a comic book fan or anything, he saw my posts and he said, he was like, yeah. So he's like, I went into a comic book shop. I saw your post. So I went into a comic book shop and I looked all over for it, but I couldn't find it. And I'm like, no, like, you got to read my post. Like, it's not actually in the store yet. You have to go to the desk and you have to order it. And they were just like, wait a minute. So it's not in the store? I'm like, no, you need to pre-order it. It's in a catalog. So then they went back. They're like, oh, so it's like you realize you're like, as much as you're putting it out there, you feel like, is anybody grasping this? So, yeah. So it is one of those things where, and I'm sure I'll find out later, like, people will be like, oh yeah, I meant to go and get it. But you're right. So there is a huge importance, because if somebody, we're not Marvel, we're not DC. So when Old Man Logan comes out, everybody's running to the stores to get it because, like, oh, it's available right now. But these small press publishers, these independents, the only way that they can thrive, the only way that they can grow is through pre-orders, through Diamond. And it is, I mean, it's really hard. And I think a lot of people do tend to go to crowdfunding because they know that it's like instant gratification, like, it's right here. And, if you order it, you're going to get it 3 to 4 months from now, which is crazy because you're like, well, if you go to a comic shop, you're going to pay less for it, and it's guaranteed to be there in 2 months. You don't have to worry about anything that might happen to me or, shipping problems. Like, that it's going to be there in 2 months. So, and you don't have to pay shipping costs. It's not like $10 for a 24-page comic. It's $3.99. And you're going to go to that comic shop anyway to get your Old Man Logan and get your new Avengers. So why not order something new from an independent small press publisher?
And you are reaching more people through Diamond either way, even with crowdfunding. It's like you still have this like small group of like, oh yeah, we'll get, you have your backing. But with Diamond, you can reach obviously every comic book store, which is cool. Yeah.
And that's been a fun thing to do too, because you feel like not only are you not only you're trying to reach out to individuals who go into shops, which is the best way to do it, where if a shop owner sees people coming into their shop saying, hey, I want to get this book by Source Point Press called Ogre, and then it's like it keeps going into their mind, and then they're like, okay, who is this company? What's this book? I got to look it up. And then hopefully they look at it, they see it, and then they're like, and then they start pushing it to their customers. But you know, it's so then you can also go to those shops. A lot of local shops around here. I'm going to be really busy come, you know, November, December, and January, because I've promised any shop that's within like 300 miles of me that I will go to their shop and I will personally sit there and do a signing to push, you know, move the books that they order. So and these shops, they take you up on that. So it's going to be fun though. I've totally cleared my con schedule for those months because I know that I'm going to be out there doing that. But that's all part of pushing it as well. So again, like not only are you, because one of the things you don't do really with Kickstarter is hard selling comic shops. You can sit there and you can do a comic shop deal where it's like, hey, if you're a comic shop, you can buy a bundle of these at a discounted price, but that's not really who you're going after. So it's been awesome because I've actually been now getting to know a lot of different shops and a lot of shop owners. So it's, everything has its benefits.
Cool. Mike, do you have a question?
Yeah. First of all, Bob, again, thank you for coming on the show. Really appreciate you taking the time. And my question is what was your inspiration for Ogre? What made you create this character, this ogre-like character, and this ghost that's kind of like, I don't know, it seems like to me when I read the book, he was like trying to train him or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he, it's, I feel like the way the world is right now, kind of, inspired it, where no matter what, I mean, you don't even really have to pick a subject, but, it seems like, Americans, my wife is English. So because of Brexit, there's a big, a divide there. And you see it, I was just in Canada and, they have their issues. And it just seems like right now in life, it's just a very big divide between people. And, so I just wanted to see the world through the eyes of somebody that doesn't give a shit about any of that. But it would have been easy, without the ghost, it would have been easy for the ogre to be like, well, screw it, I'm just going to take off. But the ghost makes him stay there. So it's, if you look at the world we're living in right now, it's very easy. My college roommate looks at all this and he just stays away from social media. He's basically the ogre. He stays away from all of it. And his opinions on either side are basically like, you're all fucked, And I apologize if you can't curse on here.
You're allowed.
You're right.
So the ogre, I think, represents a view on how two sides shouting at each other doesn't really make anybody change their mind on their point of view. The ghost is what keeps that person living in that world. And then everybody around them is just the noise of disparity and of different sides of opinions. So I know that's I kind of saying it. It's kind of like, I don't even know if I answered the question, but
no. It does make sense. It definitely makes sense. Your point of view on the book on how, you make sense, the point of view of the way the world works. And when you read the book and when people read the book, by listening to you explain it, they'll probably understand it a little bit better, know what your reasoning is behind it.
Yeah. And I thought when I wrote it, one of the things in the back of my mind was would people understand that, even without it being explained to them, would somebody kind of say I feel like there's a little vibe of what's going on in our current society right now in this book, and almost subconsciously. But it was also a lot of fun. I mean, when Sean Daly and I were, I don't know if that's coming up on your screen, but my cloud is constantly.
Oh, it's not.
All right, sorry. Sean Daly and I, we would go over it, and we were like, the first thing was, all right, he's coming out of this thing, and there's no spoiler here. It's just fun. He's coming out of this this dungeon, and they're all gathering weapons, and Sean's like, yeah, and he just gets this big club, and I'm like, no, he's gonna get a little sword, and the ghost, the ghost is gonna be like, no, you got to get this little sword, and he's gonna be like, I don't want a little sword, and he's like, and he talks him into getting this little sword, and then we have to see him like try to fight with this little sword. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he battles with it.
And then it was fun because it was like, now like you can really express the ghost and showing him like what the ghost is like, trying to train him and give him like pointers on fighting with a sword, when it's like, dude, this guy should not be fighting with a sword at all.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing when I was actually reading it, and I'm going like, yeah, this definitely doesn't fit an ogre with the sword. I mean, it looked like a little knife for him, you know what I'm saying? So that was a really funny part in the book, but yeah, cool stuff.
And again, it's kind of like the Star Wars thing too, where you got Obi-Wan Kenobi training Luke Skywalker.
See, yeah, I was kind of thinking of that, and I was like, I was thinking like either Obi-Wan or it was like Yoda or something like that in that nature. It had a very Star Wars feel in that aspect of the book.
Yeah, which is funny because the other book was inspired by Star Wars, and you see a little bit of influence in this too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Star Wars fan, so I probably need to check myself every once in a while when I'm writing something just to make sure that it's not all spilling out.
Yeah, well, it's like they say, there's only like what, 8 original stories in the world, and everything else is just an offshoot of one of them. So we have some questions from the viewers. Legend says, what genre would you categorize Ogre as, and is it family friendly?
Yeah, it's family friendly, and I would categorize it as fantasy. It's you got an ogre being chased down by some trolls, and in this fantasy world of knights and river beasts and pixies and all that. So I would definitely say it's fantasy, and I was happy about that because I've been writing salvagers, and I love sci-fi, and I would say sci-fi is like my favorite thing to write, but I also really love fantasy. And the best was when I kind of got together with Sean Daly. Fantasy's like his thing. He loves fantasy, so it was kind of a perfect thing for him to work on with me.
Scotty asks, what was the first moment when you really felt that like this idea was actually going to become a reality, and how did that feel? So
I actually was working on a very bigger epic story, fantasy story, and Sean Daly and I were going to work on something. We just didn't know what yet. So I had been outlining this really like this big fantasy story. It was going to be like, 3 or 4 trade paperbacks. It was going to be huge. And I was talking to Travis McIntyre, my editor in chief, and as we were going over it and everything, he said, he was like, give me a minute here. And he took the idea and he changed it up, and he basically was like, instead of the hero being a human, we're going to have the hero be the ogre. And instead of this trolls being like this ghost, so he basically kind of laid it out for me, like flipped it on its head a little bit. And he was like, and we're not going to he's like, you got to stop thinking of these epics, because Salvagers is 3 trade paperbacks long. I mean, 12 individual issues. And it's not really the way to start your comic book career. It's a very difficult way to start doing things, because if you've mapped it out for 12 issues and it sucks, then even if you finish it, it's going to be hard, because you're probably going to lose. If it sucks, you're going to lose the fan base, and then you're going to start feeling like, why did I even start this? So, but to do something small, keep your first series should be small, like whether it's a one-shot or like a 3-issue miniseries, which is what Ogre is. So that was Travis's idea, was to do it like smaller. And I feel like as a writer, you kind of feel like anytime anybody changes your thing, your immediate reaction is like, screw that. But I didn't message him back when he wrote everything. I just read it, and I never felt that way. Like I read it and I was like, this is a better idea. And then that night I just outlined from beginning to end the story. And I mean, it was definitely like just like bare bones. Like it didn't have a lot of the things in it. It was basically from point A to point B to point C. And I sent it to him and he liked it. He was like, run with that. And at that moment, because, you know, dealing with an editor-in-chief of any kind of publication, they're not going to tell you to run with something unless they think it looks good. So I think at that moment when he said run with it, I knew that as a good writer, not a great writer, but as a good writer, I knew that I could make it happen. And then knowing that I had Travis as my editor, I knew that we could make it better than I could on my own. And then I knew that having Sean Daly being the artist, it would be even, you know, go beyond that and go even more next level. So I think at that moment when Travis kind of flipped it on its head, I knew that it was going to be something. And then it wasn't until seeing the artwork that Sean Daly started sending me, and I can show you some of that right there. And I don't know if that's coming in clear, but
yeah.
You know, seeing some of that art when the artwork first started coming in, I think that's when I was like, I think we have something special here.
Cool. We have one more question from the viewers, and it's again from Scotty. He says, "What books or characters did you love when getting into comics and made you love the medium? Can we see any of that influence in Ogre?"
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that one more time?
What books or characters did you love when you got into comics, and what made you love the medium? And can we see any of that influence in Ogre?
You know what? It's one of the books that really influenced me was later in life. I mean, I read. I was a big fan of the X-Men, Spider-Man, all that when I was growing up. But I kind of left comics for a while. And when I started doing Salvagers, I came back into comics because I was like, all right, I want to see if the things I'm doing have ever been done before. And through a Google search, I came up with Fear Agent by Rick Remender. And I don't know if you've ever read Fear Agent, but Heath Houston is just like this alcoholic, down on his luck, destroyed human being who, you know, the Earth has been eradicated by an alien invasion, and this guy is just out there basically like a pest control guy. And if you read the story, Rick Remender does a really amazing job painting a picture with Heath Houston. And I think with that, every time I'm ever trying to do any kind of character building, I really look at what Rick Remender has done with Fear Agent, with what he's done with Tokyo Ghost, and right now with Seven to Eternity. He does a really amazing job character building, and so I would think Heath Houston is definitely a character that I look at that influenced me a little bit with Ogre.
Cool. Now
we also had another fan question that I was able to figure out what he was saying. Jay, if you want to, you want me to ask it, or
yeah, go ahead.
So Tevye asks, how did you design your characters? Because he's not an artist. So if you're just a writer, what do you tell your artist, especially for Ogre?
It depends on what artist you're working on. I mean, with Sean Daly, there's very little that you need to do. You know, basically, and this book kind of is a very easy book. It was, you know, design me an ogre, design me, you know, a troll, design me a river beast, and when you're working with somebody like Sean Daly, it's better not to give any feedback. You kind of just say, "This is what I want. You go ahead and be amazing." But you know, with other things, to answer your question with that, with like other things that I've done with like Salvagers and Shelter Division or Jasper Starlight Tavern, I definitely will say, you know, with the character, like we have a character in Jasper Starlight Tavern who's a waitress, and she's got 4 arms. And you know, as you know, he would send different sketches you would look at it and one had hair and one was bald, and it was like, oh yeah, let's make her bald. And it just kind of like, you'd have an eye for it. You'd be like, what looks appealing and what also would look like in a 360 view. One of my characters from Salvager is the first artist did a concept drawing of it and made these really weird legs. And this person I was talking to was like, that's going to be really difficult for any artist to do from behind and all that. So you definitely have to think aesthetically of like the way the character moves around in a panel. And does this look cool from this angle? But maybe it's not going to be easy for an artist to do from this angle. But so yes, with Ogre, there was not that much back and forth I had to do. The only thing with certain characters was we just wanted to make sure that each character looked as an individual. We didn't want characters being too identical where you were going to start getting confused with who was who. So, there was one guy where we were like, let's give him a patch, because it's just like an easy thing. It's like, well, if this main character has a patch, then you definitely know who it is. And another guy, we were like, let's, give him a big black mustache. So with this situation, it was more, we worked on trying to individualize each character.
Cool. And I think we're going to our personal last round of questions.
Yeah.
So.
Will we see more books set in this world?
Yeah.
After the 3 issues.
Okay. It was one of those things I was like wondering whether I should say anything or not. So this is a 3-issue miniseries, and when it's over, it's done. But when we were at Fan Expo, that's like Sean's backyard, and we actually got to sit down, and we were both kind of like it's almost like it's like sad that it's coming to an end. He's only has 10 pages left to do for issue 3, and so we were just kind of like, let's do another one. And we were both like, all right. And I already had an idea for what to do and where to set it, so it'll be set in the same world, but it'll be totally different characters. And one of the cool things is it's going to begin in a scene that's in the middle of the first one.
That's cool.
So it'll be when you're reading it, if you read the first one, you could look at it and you could go back to the first one and be like, that's right. Like, it's starting right there. Like, that's it. Like, you can see one scene from 2 different angles.
I like that. Kat, you have a question?
Yeah. So for upcoming indie creators, or again, just people that are not in the world, speak a little bit of how you build a fan base for your comic.
Well, it's definitely social media is huge because it's free, and there's a lot of people out there on social media that are looking for something new. Kickstarter is huge. Kickstarter, I usually go way heavy on Kickstarter rather than Indiegogo. I did an Indiegogo once, and I just didn't really like the format. But Kickstarter is now becoming basically like an online store for people who are looking for indie comics. And if you are doing something new, you can go onto Kickstarter, you can set your goals low, and you can talk to other people that have done Kickstarters, and you can kind of cross promote. So, other people will see your comic. And just know your fan base is really important. That's if you can pinpoint, if you know your fan base and you can pinpoint them on social media. If you do a fantasy book and you join fantasy groups, then you can promote your book in there because those people are like, I like fantasy. You do a fantasy book. Same thing with sci-fi. Same thing with horror. So it's really just knowing who your audience is, and just make it with passion. There's a point like where you're going to get to where you're like, you want to understand, like, is my book sellable? Is it marketable? Like, what's my business plan for it? But I think when you first start off, you really have to go for your heart. And if you're going to write something, you need to write it from your heart, because that's going to pour out into the page. And that's going to be what sells it for you. It's going to be people seeing your passion, because in reality, if you're at a convention, if you're promoting your book online, people are going to look at it and they're not going to be able to read the whole story. They're not going to be able to really understand who the characters are. but they're going to see you and they're going to root for you. And they're going to say, I'm going to buy this comic book because I like this person and I can see that they're passionate about it. So I want to support them. And then if you write a good comic book and you tell a compelling story, then that's going to bring them back. That's why I always say, like, the second and third issue of your comic book is sometimes more important than the first, because it proves that you've done something that's readable and something that people want, and people want to come back for more. So so if you're just starting off as an indie creator, don't put the word publisher so high. You can really, in the beginning, you can self-publish, and you can probably do just as much as any publisher can do for you. And the way it works is publishers look for you. A lot of publishers shut down their submission forms because they just get flooded with people submitting to it. But what they do is they see somebody submitting or posting things about their comic book. They see people pushing it on all social media, and then they kind of see the artwork. And then they come out to you and say, "Hey, I'd love to read your comic." And then if they like it, they say, "We'd like to bring this on." So doing the work and pushing it and finding your audience, that is what's going to lead you to opportunities with publishers.
Mike, you have your final question?
Yeah, and this is kind of like a fun type of question. Now, you told us what one of your most recent stories of what inspired you to write and whatnot. But when you were younger, when you were a kid, what was that favorite story? Can you remember that stood out to you that made you get into comic books?
I don't even know what, I'm trying to think of like what age I was at, but it was the Inferno series. The X-Men Inferno series was when, like, I was reading comics, like I was reading Spectacular Spider-Man, I was reading Wolverine, and they were like these little storylines, and you go and you pick it up every Wednesday. But then when I was introduced to the Inferno series, it was just like you went into the comic shop and it was like everything is Inferno. And yep. Like it was like you would read New Mutants, you read Excalibur, and it was all just, holy shit, this is happening here, over here, and that's why, like, really, like, one of the things I love reading right now is, like, you get that big, like, essential, like, you get, like, Thor Essential, and, you'll be reading, like, Thor 1, 2, 3, then skip to, like, 23, then you'd read, like, the Hulk 5, and it would just be, like, all over the place, and you were like, wow, like, the level of, like, crossovers in all of this. And so I think, like, when I saw Inferno series, I was blown away. And then, like, Civil War came out. And I mean, and that was like, and I read the other mega series, but when Civil War came out, I was like, wow, like, this is awesome. And I hadn't read House of M, but reading Civil War, it was like, oh, well, this all started because of House of M. So then it was like getting into House of M. So I really get off on, like, those big mega series, and it's like, it's almost like the thing, like, where it's like, if you can write a 5-page short story, that's really hard. Right. If you can write a mega series, that's almost impossible. So so if you could do those two things, you're like, writing a 24-page comic is like easy breezy. So so I think, like, when I've always tried to challenge myself. So seeing, like, that, like, I've written a bunch of short stories, and I've always had these ideas for these mega series. The mega series, like, that's way, like, there's the idea for them, like, especially with salvagers, but I mean, it's almost impossible at an indie level. So they really influenced me, and they really got me to the point where I was like, I really, like, have a love for this medium.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Inferno, because I tell everybody this, because they ask me the same question, what was that comic that you first bought? And I tell everybody, the first comic that I bought with my money that I remember off a spinner rack at a baseball card store was Amazing Spider-Man issue 313, and it was a Todd McFarlane cover, and he also drew and wrote that story. And needless to say, what did it have in that little corner? It was Inferno.
Yeah.
So it's so funny that you actually mentioned that, because it did. It crossed over in many different titles.
Many ways, yeah. And that was another one, was the whole Venom series, like, you know, starting at 300.
Yeah.
You know, it was like you had to have all of them. You know, like every, you know, it was this brand new artist, and you were like, I have to have these, you know, and you bought like 2 of them.
That was Inferno was 88, 89, somewhere around there. So that was a while ago.
Yeah. So, I'm old.
So right there with you.
Yeah. I was 12 years old when that came out. So
yeah, I was probably, yeah. So we're probably the same age. Yeah.
So I have one more question before we get into the wrap up, because I just want to ask this because it ties into the book. Yeah. We read the first 2 issues, and something that was being referenced in it, and you touched on this a little bit, but it was talking about the righteous, like who is the righteous. So, to you, in this book, who is the righteous as the writer?
The Ogre is, you know, the person that you know, I think that there's nobody is, you know, and whether you think you're right or wrong, and whether you are right or wrong in this world that we're living in right now, you know, you can't change. You can't change the way somebody thinks, and being physical, and being at you know, I hate to say it, but at being at like physical odds with each other, you know, over your beliefs on things, even when it's called, you know, cyberbullying and all that, like, it's just nobody wins, and that's the reality of it. Like, I mean, I know it sounds so cliche that like in war nobody wins, but and I think that's kind of like the way, you know, the Ogre kind of keeps swaying, is like, you know, you guys are never going to get this right. You know, no matter what you do, and no matter how many people preach about these things, you are who you are. You know, you that's the nature of who you are. And I guess I just think like the world we live in, it's always something, and it's always a divide because of that thing. So there really is no righteous. You know, the people of the South aren't any more righteous than the people of the North, because I mean, if you know, in the beginning of it, it's the North is the ones that are conquering the South, but the South are the ones that started the fight. So it's not like one person was like, we're just sitting here being cool. You know, it's.
Yeah, because sometimes there is, like, in a book, there will be like, this is the clear antagonist, this is the clear protagonist, so you know who is right and who's wrong. I like that there's that gray area with this.
Yeah, and you know, and I think with if you want to talk about influences there, Breaking Bad. You know, Breaking Bad was a huge influence, has been a huge influence on my writing since I've watched it, because Breaking Bad is one of those shows that there's no clear-cut good guy and there's no clear-cut bad guy. There could be an episode where you're like, holy shit, that guy's bad. But then a couple episodes later, you'd be like, I kind of agree with that guy. And I kind of see why he did what he did. So I really felt like, you know, Breaking Bad was a show where you took the main protagonist, and as the show went on, there were times where you're like, he's not that good. And then there's times where there's the clear antagonist, and you're like, I kind of understand why he's doing what he's doing. So, and I think that that's real life. So when I saw that, I really saw the genius in that, and I really wanted to express that in everything that I wrote.
All right. Well, thank you for coming and joining us for tonight. Hope you had a great time with us.
Oh,
I know
absolutely.
we did.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm going to actually, when this comes out, because this comes out in hit stores in October, the first one.
Yeah, so the first one is actually not in it's not in previews anymore, but you can still pre-order it. They have reorders, and that code is AUG182199. Right now in September's previews is issue 2, and that one comes out on Halloween Day. Issue 1 comes out Halloween Day.
Okay.
And, issue 2 is in September's previews right now, and it is SEP for September, SEP 181976, and that one's going to come out November 26th, so shortly after Thanksgiving, or I don't know if that's the day before Thanksgiving. And then the third one that's not out in previews yet is going to come out actually the day after Christmas, which I don't know. I'm like, I don't even know how that's. I don't think that's going to help. I don't think anybody's going to comic shops the day after Christmas.
You'll be surprised how many people go to comic shops.
We do.
Marvel and DC usually have a big week that week for some reason. I say this every year because
they tend to do bigger books, at least in recent years. So like the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, they'll have like 15, 20 books out that week. I'm like, don't they know people are poor this week?
Yeah, exactly. That's like they say, like, don't do Kickstarters November, December, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I just wanted to also say that when Ogre #1 comes out, I will be reviewing it on Frontline Reviews. So anybody who wants to check out a review for that will be out on our Frontline Reviews, which is an article we do each and every Friday. A group of us get together, we review different comics. So that would be up there. You're welcome. And where else can we find coming out for you in the near future? And where can we find you on social media and all that stuff?
So I'm on Facebook. It's, if you type in Bob Salley, you'll see my dad and you'll see me. I'm the younger one. You'll see I got a hat with a Red Sox, the Red Sox hat. Follow me there. That's like, I always say, like, that's my office. I love being on Facebook. I love interacting with people on Facebook. So if that's like my drug of choice right there is Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, follow me there. Find me, Bob Salley, Red Sox hat, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram. It's Bob_Salley, and it's Salley. And if you want to find my books that I've written, I have volume 1 and 2 of Salvagers, which is blue collar science fiction. They're just coworkers out there, like Deadliest Catch in Space. They're not the ones saving the galaxy. They're the ones cleaning up after the people who do save the galaxy. So you can find that at sourcepointpress.com. And if you go to the store, you'll find Salvagers Volume 1 and Volume 2 in there, along with a load of other awesome comics. So please shop around.
Cool. And I did put the link for Source Press in the chat. So anybody wants to go check that out, they can go check that out. But thank you for joining us. And if you ever want to do another one of these again, be sure to hit us up, and we'll do one. So
I appreciate it.
Just want to say goodbye to everybody, and stick around because we're going to be coming back with Frontline Live. So get your
another video. So
I said stick around because we're going to be coming back with with Frontline Live.
Sometimes people think it's like an intermission. It's like
it's an intermission.
We'll be right back.
You just have to refresh and you have to go to another video.
Yes.
But stay tuned. We're going. That's why you hit that notification bell, because the notification comes right up when we start another live show. But we're going to come back with our worst pick, our top 5, and our most anticipated, and we're going to talk a little bit of news. So be sure to hit that notification bell so you'll get that notification as soon as we get ready and come back. Give us like 5 minutes.
All right. Bye, guys.
All right. Bye, everybody.